Waldeboro Planning Board to order. We have a quorum. We have Jeffrey Erskine, Johnny Cosno, Jim Russo, and myself. And we have Max, and we have our trustee secretary, Susan Alexander, and we have some citizens. So, Max, since we have some people here, did you want to, you have in the agenda, okay, that's good. We have the minutes of the June 9th meeting first. Do you want to move those to later, or you still want to try to?
That's up to the board.
So we have no new business, and under old business, we have the interpretation of conditions for renewable energy structures at Controversy Lane, which I'll make the assumption that most of the citizens attending, non-board members attending are there relative to that. And then we have land use ordinance amendments to do. Not clear. It'd be great if Barbara was able to come, but she said she would be late, and I'm not sure how long we should wait. Hold on a minute, I'm trying to get this to stop me. Okay, there we go. Okay.
I think everyone that's here was here for the last meeting, so, and I did see some suggestions from Susan for some changes, so maybe it would be a good idea to go over the minutes just right now.
Okay, let's do that. Do we have any, before we do that, do we have any citizen comments that are not related to the old business for tonight? Okay, that being the case, on the minutes that everyone received, I only have one change. Was there any comments or changes from any of the other board members that they want to discuss?
I had a couple.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. So in 4.3, the Maine Coast Gymnastics, in the first paragraph, the last couple of sentences, it talks about Johnstone will confirm the legality of this arrangement. My recollection is the arrangement we wanted him to confirm the legality of was either the Maine Coast Gymnastics getting a 3-foot easement onto the Vanna property, or them selling him a 3-foot strip. Do I remember that right, Max?
Yeah, my recollection was to see if the easement would be fine rather than selling the land. And if the easement wasn't legal, then they would have to just buy the 3-foot the amount of land, so they would have the full 30-foot setback. That was my recollection. Is that what you were talking about, Jim?
Exactly that. Yeah. And all this really talks about is it infers that the arrangement is about the 6-foot stockade fence, that be in writing. So I think we missed the crux of what we wanted a legal opinion on.
The setback. Okay.
Yeah, I had the same comment, Jim, but I focused on the text of the motion, and that this approval was contingent on a legally binding easement agreement, including the installation of the 6-foot high fence and approval by the MMA or the town attorney, or a transfer of land.
Yep. Same comment, just in 2 different places. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Some language will just need to be added to address that.
So before we go further with that, are there any other changes or comments to the minutes?
For me,
So, Susan, you sent me a new version with my changes to that motion section. And I would like to add at the end of that paragraph, a line that says, or a transfer of sufficient property. So Jim, and if there are any comments from Jeffrey or Johnny, does that represent what our intent was there? So the motion would now read, on motion of Erskine Board and Planning Board members voted to approve the proposed 30 by 30 addition to Maine Coast Gymnastics condition upon a legally binding easement agreement between owner Janice Cormier Hay and abutters Richard and Linda Vanna, including installation of a 6-foot high stockade fence between the two properties along the site of the proposed addition to be erected at Cormier Hay's expense within 1 month following completion of the addition, subject to confirmation by the town attorney or Maine Municipal Association's legal department in consultation with town planner Johnstone, or a transfer of sufficient property.
Is it clear to everybody whose property is being transferred to whom?
I think it is, but I'm comfortable with if this is too much text, because it is quite long, to to make an edit to that section and resend it and vote on it next time. How do people feel about that?
I'll also point out that there is an agreement between the Vanna household and the applicant. There was an agreement that was submitted to the planning board the night of the meeting that is part of the application. So you could just reference that if you'd like.
Yes, but that was not, none of the board members have reviewed that or reviewed it during the meeting, so I'm not sure.
All right.
Yeah, I'm not sure that helps, since this is the minutes. We're trying to capture what happened, what took place.
All right.
Max, what was the opinion of the attorney? An
easement would not work. It does need to be land owned by the applicant. So the applicant, Janice Cormier Hay, is in the process right now to purchase that 3-foot land to have a sufficient setback.
Max, I'm happy if, Max, I'm sorry, Scott, I'm happy if you want to edit that and
Have this approved next
kick these
meeting.
meetings down, kick these minutes down the road till the next time.
Okay, let's do that. That okay, Jeff and Johnny?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we will do that.
There'd be a motion on that? Just for the record?
So move. Am I allowed to make a motion as a chairman? Sure.
So go ahead.
I move that we delay this minutes till next month pending some edits to the text.
Second it.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, signify aye.
Aye.
I think we have to do we have to
Oh,
do a roll
roll
call
call.
now?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a roll
Next.
call at this point.
Okay, Johnny,
Aye.
Jeff,
Here?
yes or no?
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Jim, and I vote yes as well. Okay,
Oh, roll call for vote. Gotcha.
yeah.
The first one.
The first one, okay. Okay, next on the agenda is the renewable energy structures at Controversy Lane. So, Max, do you want to lead this off, or should, how would you like to start this?
So As I stated last month, there's been some confusion regarding the conditions that were placed on the solar farm application for Controversy Lane. There was a written letter that was sent to the board, but I also see that Mike Atkinson from Sincarfa is in the audience tonight. So, Mike, do you want to just talk about the conditions? Because from my recollection of this is that you just want to be sure that you and everyone at Sincarfa is following the 6 conditions that were set, because there is an intention to at least come to the board next month, and you want to be sure that what is being presented is what the board initially, or what the board intended for your group to have done at that point. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide an update on our 6 conditions and where we're at with those. But the main reason we wanted to hear from the planning board this evening was to get clarification on one specific condition, that is to submit an agreement with the owner regarding repairing the roads to meet the town requirements for a major private street and to complete the work prior to approval by the code enforcement officer and the town planner. Max had circulated a memo back in May with his Stan Waltz, the code enforcement officer, and John Daigle's recommendations for what work would need to be done to get Controversy Lane up to those standards of a major private street. And we just wanted confirmation that, once that work was done to Controversy Lane, the work outlined in Max's memo, that scope, that once that was completed, we would meet that condition. We also were not sure if the condition was intended to include all 4 of the roads in the subdivision, or specifically just Controversy Lane, the road that would be used for access.
And the memo that Mike is talking about was given to the planning board members prior to this meeting.
The June 29th letter.
Yeah, it was distributed in May, but I didn't have the June 29th. Oh, yeah, there's the June 29th letter from Sincarfa, and then attached to that is the memo that was being referred to by.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll just give a little bit more color, for the reason for this request. Our Mr. Brown, who we're purchasing this property from, is required to complete this road work, and the contractor he plans to use has a lighter schedule for the next couple of weeks and wants to get this work done as soon as possible. So Mr. Brown is going to be paying a large sum of money, and we'll be assisting in some of those costs for the time being, and we just want to make sure that should we do this work earlier than we had planned, that we would be meeting this condition, and that the work is not going to be done, and then we'll find out later on that additional work on top of that is needed.
Okay.
So the condition that's under question is condition number 3, to submit an agreement with the owner requiring repairing the roads to meet the town requirements for a major private street and to complete the work prior to approval by the code enforcement officer and town planner. So I guess the question for the board, as Mr. Atkinson just said, was, does this mean strictly Controversy Lane, or is this Controversy Lane, Sunset Ridge, Turkey Lane, and Stagecoach Road?
Max,
Yes.
can I ask a question, or do I have to wait?
Scott, do you mind if John asks a
No,
question?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, I went over the memo. Do all 4 of the roads need pretty much the same amount of resurfacing and the same amount of attention to get them into the proper shape? Or is Controversy Lane, does that need more attention?
So the work, or unless Mike, do you want to answer that one, or do you want me to answer?
I was just going to say I'm not sure. I think that's a question for Stan Waltz and John Daigle.
So when I went there with John Daigle and Stan Waltz and John York, The items to address it were the same items that were discussed during the January meeting. When I asked John York, John Daigle, and Stan Waltz, how does Stagecoach look? They said Stagecoach is fine, because I think John York did that very recently, not like last year, but and Turkey Lane, I don't think has the same issues. Sunset Ridge is the only other road that was in question, but the other part of it is when we walked and looked at the roads, the issues were not about the width of the roads or the grading or anything. It was more about the fact that there's potholes and it's just not safe in general for a vehicle to travel it. It's nothing relating to the actual private street standards in the ordinance. It's just a matter of potholes and it's not well drained. That was it.
Okay.
The only difference between what was suggested back in December/January versus what's being said now for Controversy Lane is there are two culverts that cross Controversy Lane that were not included in the estimate back then, which adds potentially $10,000 to that $7,000 cost.
Right.
That was John York's figure. So that's the big difference.
I guess my concern would be you should have some redundancy in these roads, so maybe it should apply to all four. That's just my own thought.
Okay.
Well, let me kick in then, and Jeff and Jim can comment. Because when this issue came up, frankly, I was a bit confused. And I went back to my notes, and my notes that I had in reference to making the motion with the contingencies has, and I believe the majority of the discussion during the meeting relative to the repair of the road was road singular, meaning Controversy Lane. However, with the difference is that Sincarfa was required to go through the process to create a road association, which would involve then their participation in the future maintenance and upkeep of all the roads, because they would be a member like any of the other property owner members, a member of the road association, and would therefore in the future participate in the upkeep of all the roads, but that the requirement for the repair outside of the landowner, forgetting that Sincarfa was responsible for the repair of Controversy Lane to bring it up to the standard the requirements so that they could use it for construction. So just personally, my understanding and my intent was not to require Sincarfa to be required to fund the repair of all of the roads, other than as being a member of the road association. That's what my intention was during the meeting, and my interpretation of the motion that I think I intended to make anyway. So my interpretation is that Sincarfa is not required to fund repair of anything beyond Controversy Lane. I'm opening it up to the rest of the board for how they interpreted it.
My recollection is much the same, Scott. As you said, the principal thing was to fix the main construction access, which is also the main access for the whole development or subdivision, Controversy Lane. But also, and I think Mike mentions it in his letter, any other roads that might be used during construction. And that depends on the logistics plan. But basically, anything involved in construction needs to be brought up to spec and then left that way at the end of the construction period. All the roads, just as you said, pertain to the road association. It has to be a road association for the entire area, not just a subset, because it did the subdivision did happen over time, I think in multiple stages. Yeah, my recollection.
And then Jeff, your interpretation?
Pretty similar. Of course, there's the issue of bringing the road up to standard now, and then all the construction happening. So that's obviously that is intended to be cared for at the end of construction as well, that's still up to standard. But also, I agree that in my mind, when we were going over this originally, was that Controversy Lane is not only the access for everyone, but the only access or the only road used by Sankarfa during construction and maintenance. And my intention with that was what was going to be covered by their repair regime, if you will. It was a bit of a surprise to hear it including the other side streets in the repair portion. Of course, the agreement between all the property owners in the HOA, if you will, that's sort of a separate item in my mind, but that the original agreement of fixing up Controversy Lane so it's not a nightmare to drive down with normal vehicles, that was something everyone would agree to be part of, including Sankarfa, for the sort of delayed maintenance that's been an issue for a long time there. So that was my intention anyways.
Okay. Johnny, did you have anything to add?
No, I guess you can look at it, if Controversy Lane, I'm just kind of extrapolating, if that for whatever reason was somehow blocked or unusable or just not available, and you had to use the other areas, other roads, that was my only thought, and maybe have those ready to go as like a
backup.
A backup. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, that was my thought.
Yeah, I haven't been out there, Johnny. It's a good idea, but I think the road layout doesn't really lend itself to that. I mean, the other three roads we talk about are all branch off
Right.
to the west, and
Yeah.
and Controversy is really the only way in and out, at least for the first third or so of its length.
Okay.
So it seems that the general consensus of the board members present that were present for these reviews and approvals seems to generally coincide. And the question is, what do we need to do to satisfy Michael, your needs as the applicant, and Max? What should we do we need some kind of clarifying motion, or do we create a document and have the board members sign it that describes our interpretation of the motion that was approved?
Well, first, Mike, does this answer your question that you had for the board?
Yes, this answers the question. As far as next steps are concerned, I was under the impression that, any change to the written condition wouldn't be possible, and that's fine and understandable. We're comfortable moving forward with the repairs to Controversy Lane, given the board's clarification of their interpretation. One other clarification I would like to make is that the Controversy Lane is currently up to the standards of a major private street, and it's just the repairs of the potholes and the installation of culverts as outlined in your memo that would be required by us to make in order to use the road and obtain a building permit.
Correct.
That would be up to Stan and the town rather than the planning board specifically, correct, Max?
The potholes? That,
Yeah, the condition of the road meeting the requirements that we're setting here of,
Right. That's something that Stan and I'm going to have John Daigle included as well because I've had him involved for the last few site walks and controversy lane discussions.
Mhm. Okay.
They're going to be the ones who are going to say, yep, road's built up to standard and the potholes are addressed.
Okay.
In terms of what would be required, when I spoke with the Maine Municipal Association's legal department on this, the first step they did state was it would be good to have the board clarify their intent so that in a public setting, so that we can look back on this.
Okay.
It's up to the board if you would want to make an amendment to the conditions. Although, if you're saying that it's not for all the roads, then it would just be a document that would be needed, and that might be the minutes at this point. The condition, the amendment to the conditions would only be if I would only say the amendment to the conditions would only be if a majority of you said that this was for all the roads and we wanted to only have it for Controversy Lane. But if a majority of you are saying that this is only for Controversy Lane, then I would say you just need to, I'll make an updated document that the board can look at and the minutes will reflect it, that condition is meant to only be about Controversy Lane.
And any other roads used in construction?
Used in construction. Yep.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good, because I think that was our intent, Jim, and I think that's a good addition just to, if they've got to be parking things on the other roads, it needs to be brought up to snuff for that and then maintained for that level of work. And as long as you're fine with that, Michael, I think that's a reasonable imposition on you that you should, if you're going to use those parts of those roads as part of your, because again, a lot of this does also depend on the logistics plan, which, we need to make sure is sufficient to protect the neighborhood during the construction, which is going to be disruptive in any case. So, great. Okay.
Excuse me, Scott. And
Go ahead,
my
Jim.
expectation is that logistics plan would also include restoration of any roads used in construction to their original condition, right?
Minus the potholes.
Well, it starts off
I
without
don't think we
potholes.
want to quite it. Yeah. Okay.
Construction equipment will tear up that road. It's just a fact of life. And we want to make sure not only that it's repaired prior to construction for everyone's use, but that it's left in good repair when everything is done.
Just while everyone is here, Scott, would you mind if the board just quickly went through the conditions, maybe as an update, and we make sure that Sankarfa is going on the right path for the other conditions, or
No, I don't mind it. I don't mind at all. Go ahead.
First one is provide an estimated cost of decommissioning and come to an agreement with the town on a bond or letter of credit or escrow to cover the decommissioning costs. Mike sent me a draft, I think it was last week. I haven't had enough time to actually look at it, but Scott and the rest of the board, was this item meant specifically just for the town manager and attorney, or is this something that the board is approving next month as well?
Jim was nodding and yes and no at the same time. This was just for the town. I think this isn't, it's the board is imposing that requirement, but that's for the town to make sure that they have.
Do you mean the town manager and town attorney?
Yeah.
Okay. Jeff, Johnny? For condition 1,
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, sorry.
for town manager, town attorney, or the planning board for the decommissioning plan. I can read it again.
Yeah.
Provide an estimated cost of decommissioning and come to an agreement with the town on a bond or letter of credit or escrow to cover the decommissioning costs.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Having it go to the town manager and attorney, or having it go to the planning board.
Is it an either or proposition, or can you do
Because
all three?
it just says the town.
Okay.
So that's why I'm trying to make
I think even when we talked about that at the meeting, it was for to
Town
go
manager?
to the town manager and the town attorney. I
Okay.
don't see the need for the planning board to get involved in, we're not gonna want to evaluate that, I don't think.
So
Condition.
Max, sorry,
Yeah.
just to clarify, that's something you will then provide to the town manager and town attorney and not something that we'll have to discuss at the next planning board meeting?
Correct. Although it will still end
Okay.
up being a public document when it's done, but
Right.
All we should discuss is status.
and we can talk about that at the next meeting.
Okay.
Condition
Good.
2, initiate the statutory creation of a road association for road maintenance with the neighbors. This was done kind of twice, where an invitation went out on March 26th, but there wasn't a quorum that day. But there was a meeting held with a quorum on April 26th that I believe was voted on to establish the road association. So I would, yeah. I assume that would be satisfied unless there is a different interpretation from a member of the board.
No.
This
Okay.
one.
Condition 3, we've gone over.
Hold on, Max,
Sorry.
I'm willing to interrupt if you don't mind, but there's a question from from a
Yep, I'm
citizen.
taking it from Tyler.
Go ahead, Mr. Lupian.
If this is the wrong time, I'm happy to wait with my question, but I
Okay,
do have a question about that particular condition.
okay,
And that's that we did vote to form an association, but I think many members of the neighborhood voted on the thought that all of the roads were coming up to standard. And I think that some of the people who live on those side roads, myself, I live on Controversy, now knowing that only Stagecoach is going to get fixed. Yes, we all ride on that road, but then we have other roads to go on. And Sunset is bad. Sunset has a poor road base, but I digress. We voted based on what I assumed was good faith that all of our roads were going to be brought up to standard. In fact, we were even presented with a budget for the repair of Sunset.
and that,
Tyler,
okay.
I'm sorry, Tyler, just for clarification, you meant Controversy Lane, not Stagecoach, right?
I live on Stagecoach, but Controversy, yes.
Right. Something that I stated in my memo was that what the board was likely saying in their interpretation was, when it comes to this project, Controversy Lane is something that can be enforced by the town, but it just wouldn't be the other items because they are still private roads. That comes to a private agreement that I would encourage the road association, Sincarfa and Buddy Brown, to have sort of coordinated. I've spoken with Buddy. I'm not going to speak for him since he's not here. There seems to be intent to finish the road, Sunset Ridge, I should say. And the issue is more of just when the timeline of everything. Once he gets the funds, he would like to then start Sunset Ridge, but I think the only reason he hasn't committed to it is because we're still in this limbo process right now of what needs to be done before the transaction of the property can be completed. But this was a point that you did raise to me. I am aware of that.
So I guess I would, yeah, I'm not sure where to go with this because I understand I mean, it's good to know about that understanding relative to the vote. But again, based on our intent and what the applicant's responsible for, as opposed to the original developer, again, that's part of the private agreement. I guess I would be, if the landowners, didn't want to in the future, I guess I don't know whether we should even comment on what your homeowners association relative to the road would or would not want to do.
Well, I guess if I can comment one more time, I think at that last meeting, some of us would have disagreed a little more vehemently had we known that there was no way that some of our roads were going to get fixed at all, or nothing in writing. I mean, because I feel like we've been burned before. So I know you guys can't do anything about what I'm talking about right now, but I just need someone to hear it.
Sure. Well, I guess if there's never been a road association, and I struggle with the owners, should they not want to join together to participate in collectively taking care of the roads without, depending on the starting point. Like, no, we don't want to have a road owners. You don't have a road owners association now. This was an opportunity to get one going and to get at least part of it fixed. And if many of the people want to change their view of it without, having a changing starting point, I don't know. I don't know where to go with that.
But my suggestion would be, first, I think it's great that there has been a road owners association formed. And now with the clarification of our intent in the last meeting with the conditions around road repairs, convene another meeting at that road association with Sincarfa and Buddy Brown and work through. So what do we do now that we have a better understanding of what repairs are going to be done for construction, and what do we do now with the rest of the roads? At least now you've got a vehicle to address it, which wasn't
Right.
even there before.
And you have a vehicle to negotiate with the guy who started the whole thing in the first place. So you're in a better position that way as a negotiating position. It's not a union, but you're better off with it. And just not as chairman of the board, but just personally, my feeling is that this is a good opportunity to get at least the main road coming in repaired and culverts put in and brought up to speed. It's a good jump start for your neighborhood. But that's just my personal opinion. I don't have to suffer through what you guys have to suffer through, so it's easy for me to say from afar. But so I think it'd be worth more conversations with your folks, that now that we have this clarification. And there is, if I understand correctly, Max, there is still this commitment from Buddy Brown to do the other repairs. Is that correct?
Again, I did speak with Buddy on July 1st, and he said that was the intent, and that's the intent he's always had since January. And I strongly encourage the road association, or I strongly encourage them to talk with Buddy and outline what his plan is, even without this, because and that is what I just outlined in the memo.
Yep.
What I've kind of seen as a problem was there's not that much written documents to outline timelines and agreements. And that's been part of the problem. But for this specific item, an example I'll give is a suggestion that John Daigle did make, I think back in April, was having trees clear cut, or not clear cut, but cut down a few trees that were on Stagecoach, on private property owners, on private pieces of property, not near the road, to deter frost damage. That's something that John made the suggestion for, but that's something that we couldn't enforce because not only it's on a branching road at that point, but it's on a person's private piece of property. And I think in the memo, John Daigle and Stan Waltz said that something that would help would be a speed limit or some type of way of enforcing speed limits in that area. But again, that's something that they can't enforce because that's for the private owners to handle. And there's no 50-foot right-of-way public easement that's under town jurisdiction there. So we can't do that type of thing. That's the thing about a private road. It's all private agreements. The only reason, which my initial interpretation was for the land use ordinance for why Controversy Lane had to come up to standard was because it was going to be used for a project that needed municipal approval. And that's what caused it to meet those major private street standards and have the access. As Jim pointed out, if construction's happening somewhere else, then it would need that other road to be fixed then to that standard. But I guess in short, all I can say is you need to talk to Buddy Brown and see what his plan is and really nail down with him what's intended. Because he's the one who'll have that answer for you. I know it's not the answer to hear from me, but that's the truth, unfortunately.
Well, I thank you guys for your time. Forgive me if I feel a bit jaded on this. But John also said that Sunset needed to be dug down and a foot of base material added to it. So
Is this John York or John Daigle?
John Daigle.
Okay.
So, and I'm taking too much of your time, I realize.
No, it's
But-
we understand.
The fact is, at some point, the town approved the planning board and the code enforcement approved those roads. It wasn't any of you guys. And I feel we're still kind of paying for that. And so,
Right, but again, that is between the owners and the developer as part of the private agreement. And because there was never a road association, you haven't had a meeting, something to push you as a group to organize together to enforce the original agreements. I mean, once it was approved by the town, then again, it's not an enforcement, like, the planning board, as it's not an enforcement arm. So, but you have an association now, and, we understand your jadedness on this issue, but, hopefully you collectively, you can get something done on this. Again, our role here is we can require and have enforceable as part of the approval for Sincarfa to fix the roads that they're going to use. And then and these other conditions. So it's a start, hopefully.
I'll just say one more thing, and that's that Mr. Brown currently with the property he owns, excuse me, has 4 votes on the association because he has 4 different lots. And obviously one of those will transfer to Sincarfa. So Michael, we welcome any conversations that you would like to have with us and Mr. Brown as well, and anything that you'd like to put in writing, we'd love to see it.
Yeah, as soon as we, maintain ownership of I think 2 parcels and have those 2 votes, we plan to be involved in the road association. I can't speak, like Max said, for what Mr. Brown plans to do. Our intent here is not to say that those remaining roads will not be repaired by Mr. Brown. We just want to know tonight what is required of us in order to get our building permit.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Just get many more than the 4 votes, then make sure you have a majority, that's all. Okay, Max, you were on, so we were on condition 2, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Condition 2. And I guess that did raise the question of what the intent for that language was, what would satisfy that item to get the building permit. I'll read it again. Initiate the statutory creation of a road association for road maintenance with the neighbors.
I think that's clear.
I believe it's been met.
Okay.
Uh.
Anything else? Okay,
Condition 3, we just went through that with repairing of the roads.
okay,
Condition 4, to work in good faith to reroute the snowmobile trail and to provide access for the neighbors to the river as pedestrians.
okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no,
I
no,
don't think-
go ahead,
I don't
Mike.
think we.
I was going to say,
I don't think we need to have updates on all of them tonight, but if you're coming back, but,
I was just going to say I didn't have anything for the snowmobile trail. I didn't have any updates. That's why I was going to toss it over to Mike
Okay.
because he seemed
did
like he
you
was
want to
excited.
update us, Mike, on that? Do you have something brief you can?
That's something we need to have our engineers and our construction team update on the plans. I think a lot of it is going to require folks to be out on site and physically see, what terrain looks like out there.
Okay,
But we still have that, on our list of things that needs to be done.
okay,
And lastly, because number 6 is saying the conditions would be met before a building permit is issued. Number 5 was to submit a logistics plan for construction to be approved by the town prior to receiving building permit. This will require approval from the CEO, town planner, and planning board, which the update for that is CARFA plans to give it next month, hopefully, which I'll make sure Stan Waltz attends the meeting along with myself. And then the planning board will review it as well. I thought that was the 3 of us review it and say whether or not it's acceptable, and we each hold a vote to say yes. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Jim?
But then, as part of the public meeting,
Yep. Public meeting.
all the landowners in Controversy Lane also get to weigh in at that point in time.
Notice will be sent out. There will be an abutter notice, and then there will be a separate one, which I'll mail the same day to all members of the subdivision. I just want to have it split from abutter and subdivision notice just for records.
Yep.
And we'll get to see that in advance of the meeting, right?
Yep. The logistics plan, yes, that will be sent ahead of the meeting.
Yeah, with that in mind, Max, I will be attending next month's meeting remote. I'll be traveling, so I'll
That's
be
fine.
remote, but I'm not leaving until Wednesday. So as long as I have, and I prefer hard copies being old school. So if I can have you, I know you're going to get me those to before then, but just letting you know that I'd like to have that, before I go.
All right, what day are you leaving? Or we can coordinate. We can all coordinate that afterwards.
Yep, no problem.
Max, did you see the note from Tyler? He was wondering how far in advance will that be available?
Mike, do you have an idea when you might have the logistics plan ready?
Hoping within the next 2 weeks. When would you like to have it available?
Let me.
We don't have it yet. We're not prepared to have it, in the next few days. We're really not prepared to, say all of our conditions are met and to go and get our building permit. My tonight is simply to just get a clarification on that, on that issue.
If you have it by in 2 weeks would be July 22nd. If you have it by then, or July 26th, because that'll give you the weekend then, you have it by July 26th. That gives me, I think, more than enough time, more than 2 weeks for everyone to get that information. So, the last full week of July 26th, I can try and get that out to everyone, but that'll be up to Sincarfa.
That sounds reasonable to me. What date is the next meeting?
Second.
Second Thursday in August, whatever day that is.
Which would be August 12th. And that actually raises another thing. So when we talked last month about rescheduling, because the fire department uses this room on Wednesdays now, it escaped me that August 12th is also going to be the day that the Controversy Lane Road Association was going to meet at 6 p.m. as well on August 12th. So that was a very, very stupid moment on my end. Tyler, we've been talking quite a bit about, Tyler's still here, right? Yes. We've been talking quite a bit about how to schedule that if you want us to try and have the planning board move to a different date, or my suggestion of we hold it the same day at the same time. Sincarfa would just be first on the agenda. And then once that's done, I would have a Zoom breakout room so that the members of Controversy Lane subdivision can have their meeting going at the same time the planning board has the rest of their meeting. Do you want to give your thoughts on to the planning board about the meeting times? Tyler? Tyler still here?
Yeah, he's muted though. There you go.
There he is. Okay.
So I'm a farmer. If you want us to move it, Max, we could push it out another week, I think, and still capture everyone. I mean, I think quite a few interested neighbors will be at that planning board meeting, given that the logistics plan will be presented. And nothing we've ever done has been a short period of time as a neighborhood. So, I mean, if it's easier for us to just move it to the 19th, we can do that as well. I mean, if that works for you.
Well, it's fine for us as a planning board because then we don't have to do anything. But just you could, and if you're fine with this, Max, I'm fine with if all of you folks want to, if we could put that, we would put that first on the agenda, regardless of what else comes up. If you want to have it first so that all of your members could attend the planning board and then you could split off and have the rest of your meeting, or you can have it on a separate night. I'm fine with that. Just let us know if we need to put the Sincarfa thing first, and I would be happy to do it unless any of the board doesn't want to do that. Let me know now, but I'm just offering that to you. So.
Jim, Jeff, John, any of you have thoughts?
Fine,
Yep, no problem.
no problem.
Okay.
So, Mr. Lupi, you can change your meeting night and everybody still come, or you can all come and we can put that agenda item first, and you could then split off and have the rest of your road association meeting. And you could just let Max know how you want to do it once you talk to people.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If you just had to put a number to it, are we talking about an hour for that portion of the agenda, or?
I think, I mean, if next month is only just the logistics plan, that was the other reason I wanted to go through the conditions to see what else had to be addressed by next month.
Mhm.
If it's just the logistics plan, I think an hour, 90 minutes at most would be a safe bet. And I only just throw in the 90 minutes because I never know what public comments are like. So
It's going to depend on the contents of the logistics plan and how well it meets everyone's needs.
Mhm.
All right, so
Right. And I'll make sure Stan and I are looking at well, as long as the plan does come in when it's said, I'll make sure to sit down with Stan and have us go over it. And I'll see if John Daigle can possibly look at it as well, so he can give his thoughts. But he's busy at this time of year, so I'm hoping I can get his thoughts on the matter.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Great. Is there anything else on this item? Any other questions or comments? We don't need a motion or anything like that at this point. So we can move on our agenda unless there's something else anybody wants to pitch in. Just want to make sure everybody has a chance.
I see Michael Atkinson, Tylupian, Blatchett household. Who else is? Where's my? I don't know who else is on there. But do any of you have any
Paige
comments?
Also, yeah, anything
Also,
to add or comment? Okay. Great. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and we appreciate your time on this item. Whoop, okay.
Yep. Thank you for your time and the clarification this evening. Look forward
Okay.
to speaking with you again in another couple of weeks.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Good luck. Bye. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Who is
Yes.
the person, who is the person called Teresa Blatchett?
I think they're still here. You're muted.
Who are you, sir?
It's Michael and Teresa. We live on 281 Controversy.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, thanks everybody. So all we have left is the land use ordinance amendments. Just that.
Yep. Everyone else left, so
Okay.
it's been nice to get some more opinions on that. So yeah, do you want me to quickly just give some clarification on this? Do you want me to give a little preamble? How would you like to do this, Scott?
Well, unless, Jeff or Johnny or Jim, I mean, I think you outlined at the last meeting what the intent was of what we were doing with these. And I think it was self-evident from what you sent that the idea here is to make amendments to the land use ordinance and get something, my understanding based on what we've done previously as a board is we create these changes to the land use ordinance and approve them as a planning board. They go to the select board for their consideration and approval to put on the warrant for the next vote, town vote. We'd have a town meeting prior to that, or a meeting that's open to the public, a public meeting, that we would review these changes prior to the vote, and then it would be voted on. So the idea is most of these appear to be addressing things that weren't addressed or cleanup. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, all these items were some major issues that came up this past year that the land use ordinance committee didn't take into account last year. And I at least worry that if they're not addressed, these same problems are going to come up again. I was asked
Most assuredly.
Yeah, definitely. And one of them was actually regarding notification for private roads. As I said just a moment ago, what's required is to send out a letter to someone who physically abuts the property. Although I would assume this isn't the first case it's happened, but I would assume what should be the standard practice is to send a notice to anyone who uses that private road, so that they are given a notice that there is a project that is happening on a road that they participate to help maintain. And I assume that's a fair assessment to make that more of a standard normalized practice for future going forwd.
Yep.
I just got one question. At the very end of page 1,
Mhm.
it says failure of, and then you had an abutter, and then you crossed that out. And then if you put a resident to receive a notice, what was the significance of that? Is an abutter different than a resident, or?
Because an abutter is defined as someone who physically abuts the property. Although, I guess what I could make as a change instead is changing the definition.
Right, because it was just confusing, because if you abut, you.
Well, yeah, but I don't think you want to change the definition of an abutter, because
It's an abutter.
an abutter has a very specific definition and meaning that I don't think.
Abutters are residents, not all residents are abutters.
Yes, because for example, Johnny, and just the one we went through, there are abutters on Controversy Lane, which we were discussing relative to Sincarfa. But
Right.
we have to, Max, we've asked Max to send a notice to all of the residents of even the roads that are off of Controversy Lane, because even though they aren't abutters to the property at question that Sincarfa was buying, it's important. So,
Okay.
so we'll get to that, because I'd like to just quickly move through these items if we can, give a shot at moving through these.
Yeah, just very quickly, the item I
Yeah.
was going to just say before that happened,
Yeah.
I did get a quick question from a resident who asked about the shoreland ordinance. And
Okay.
I know we've been talking about amending it regarding commercial fisheries and water dependent properties
Okay.
that are in that district. The
Yeah.
only reason I didn't include it in this one is because I'm still not sure what the planning board wanted done at that point. So I left it blank for now because I didn't want to take an assumption that could have gone far off track.
Okay.
And from looking at the ordinance, I, for some reason, thought industrial uses were allowed, but it's actually, we removed the industrial uses last time, and the only thing allowed is commercial activities.
Mhm.
So like the boat launch that's used for commercial fishermen, which is an allowed use, that's still allowed, or marina, for example. Those are all still allowed uses, but
Yep.
we've removed industrial. So a land-based aquaculture facility, for example, that's not allowed at the Pine Street or the Dutch Neck Marine Park.
Okay.
So if that is still something that the board wants to have or have some way of addressing, that's still open to possibilities. I just didn't include it in my items right now, just because I didn't know what the board wanted to do on that item.
Well, from what you're saying, I'm not sure what we would do, so I don't know what we would want to do.
That's why I was confused, because I was under the impression that there was this desire to still have that conversation, but I don't know if that conversation was more about industrial uses in those commercial areas.
I think it was.
But now that the industrial has been removed, so I didn't know if there was still an actual issue with that.
Okay.
If it is, it'll just come up in conversation again.
Okay. I'm fine with that. Everybody else okay with that?
Good. That was the concern, industrial. Yep.
Okay, so Susan has kindly sent a lot of edits that and Susan, feel free to weigh in with these as the conversation goes on. However, I would mostly say that I'd suggest for the most part that maybe we can create a new version. Max can take these edits, and I think generally most of those kind of changes that editorial we should just make. But I would move through with some, I'll start with the first one, and I have a question, comment, and we'll just go through them and then open it up to everybody else on each one. On the first one, so it's page 1, amend the following sections on page 3.2. The one thing I'd like to make sure is really clear, it says conditions of approval. A condition may not be imposed to regulate an item not specifically addressed in this ordinance, nor an item that is outside the scope of the proposal. And I think I understand what this is going for, but I'm wondering whether this is clear enough what outside the scope of the proposal means. Is that clear enough to everybody? Or is that just, is it, you know, I understand what it's trying to do. I'm just wondering whether it's not making it any clearer.
Well, I suppose if you say outside the scope, that's open to interpretation, isn't it? From the.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm
Yeah.
getting at, I think, is this
So,
is,
yeah, I would think a little bit more clarity in the language might be appropriate.
I mean, it's okay if it's somewhat ambiguous because the board can work through it, but
Okay. So I'll clarify that one.
yeah,
Because
outside the scope of the proposal. I just would be worried that an applicant would say, the board is trying to impose on me a requirement that's outside the scope of the proposal.
right.
When, you know, if the board thinks it's really something that it's applicable. And now, again, it is true that the board, we're not allowed to go outside the land use ordinance to make requirements, but maybe that's something that the MMA could help with, actually, Max.
Okay.
They must have dealt with this before.
And the example is, you know, occasions where state agencies didn't grant approval. How are they fixing it? Let's go there. It seems to be a problem almost outside our purview.
Yeah.
Well, and this was also similar. The other instance I was thinking of, this was talked about last month with the subdivision who had a private agreement that stated, they had their own conditions for what could happen in a subdivision. And when I spoke with MMA, they said that we don't really have too much power over enforcing that agreement. So that's another sort of pathway I was leaning towards when I was writing that. But I do understand the points that are being made right now, that it might be taken, that it likely will cause more confusion than anything.
That's the way I see it now. I need 1 minute and you guys keep going. I'll be right
Okay.
back.
So, anything else on that whole section, page on 3.2? I think Susan had some comments on the next paragraph where municipal approval does not exempt the applicant from other regulatory bodies or private agreements. I think that's fine. Susan, you have exempt applicant approval. Oh, I like that from maybe does not exempt the applicant from meeting
Is this-
from, I think from other regulatory bodies is okay. And private agreements, because the Susan, you have engaging in private agreements, but for example, in this case, and we've had a couple of these where there was an existing private agreement that didn't involve the applicant in the first place. And private agreements might, even though the applicant wasn't part of engaging in that, they might end up being covered by, the requirements of an existing private agreement. So I think that wording is okay.
Right. And this was also a case of, and this was me looking at very historic records, but one person making promises to some residents, some abutters, and saying, oh, don't worry, this is what it's going to end up being like. And once they got planning board approval, they sort of turned around and said, well, I don't have to do it anymore because the planning board didn't enforce me to do that. This is pretty much saying just because the board approves it doesn't mean we negate any private agreement you may have made with someone.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because the board is enforcing what the land use ordinance says, but whatever private agreements that are in writing isn't really something you're supposed to codify. And that's what this is just saying.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Anything else on that one? The next one on the page 3.3 section. You've noted here, so you have it reading for application that require using private roads. Right, a notice must be sent out to the co-related, and Susan questioned that, and I would propose the word relevant
Relevant road association.
instead of co-related. How does that sound, Susan?
I'm not, I'm not clear where you are, Scott.
Okay,
Are you looking at my memo?
no, I'm looking at the original, Max's original,
Okay, what page?
bottom of page 1,
Bottom of page 1.
the next to last, the third to last paragraph, the paragraph starts for applications that
Okay.
require using private roads. A notice must be sent out to the, I'm proposing relevant road association as opposed to co-related.
Okay,
And so I think the last paragraph there on that page of substituting a resident for an abutter is fine because of the earlier in that section, a letter must be sent to each property owner that benefits from the private road. So that sort of defines
so you're agreeing to substitute a resident for an abutter.
yeah.
Good.
So, but that, you know what, I think then after, in the previous section that we just talked about where it says relevant road association, then
Yes,
that second sentence, if there is no road association, then a letter must be sent to each property owner and then put paren resident, end paren, that benefits from the private road, because that will define the word resident that's then used in the sentence starting the word failure. Because then when it says failure of a resident, it'll be clear that the resident is a property owner that benefits from the private road.
but suppose he's a renter. Suppose he's not the property owner, but he is a resident at that property. Would he-
A rent,
note-
I don't think a renter has any legal authority relative to that.
Okay,
Yeah, and I think I'll pull it up in the definition, but I believe the property owner or the abutter is someone who pays their taxes for that piece of property.
okay.
I'm going to look that up just for confirmation.
So Scott, you wanted to read each property owner parenthesis resident, or are you striking property owner and
No.
substituting resident?
After property owner, insert after the words property owner, paren, resident, and paren.
Thank you.
So it does say so it's actually different. So
Okay.
a butter is one whose property abuts is contiguous or joins at a border or boundary, including the
Mhm.
property across the street, road, public way, or private way. And with the private way, I have still done that. It's always been the person who's been right across the street from the private way. But I believe, I don't remember where it was, but I know there was something about, aggrieved party, an owner of land whose property is directly or indirectly affected. So I must have subconsciously been adding the two.
Mm.
So
Okay.
I when I'm sending out the notices, I always base it on what the tax cards say
Mhm.
for the person's property. So
Yep.
it's really up to the person who owns that property to then notify the renter.
Sure.
But I can include that in the abutter notices that says if you own the property but rent it out, it is advised you notify the person who's renting the property. I'll
Okay,
make sure
that's fair.
that
That's
can
good.
be more of just a private thing that I can do.
So maybe I'm gonna change what I said on that the last sentence of page 1. It says failure of, and you've crossed off an abutter and put in a resident. Shouldn't it say failure of an abutter or a resident to receive notice? Because isn't it already true that if an abutter doesn't receive a notice for some reason, it doesn't invalidate the public hearing? Shouldn't it be both?
Can be. And I can certainly make that change.
Okay, anybody have anything else on that one? Okay, top of page 2. Add the following section on page 619. I'm
Yeah.
confused.
So what
What have
happened?
you- Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was gonna say, one thing that might help is what these numbers are, because I'm not sure what a side, if you happen to have the numbers accessible, that you define side, rear, and road setbacks for us along with what the numbers are.
So whenever anything is being built in town, you would get a building permit. And if it's under 100 square feet, then you wouldn't need a building permit, but you'd still follow the setbacks. The setbacks vary depending on the district you're in. And it's essentially just a way of saying that what you are building is not going to be too close to your neighbor's property line to impact it for visual impairment or stormwater runoff or noise, and various other things. A side rear setback is pretty much 3 of the 4 boundary, well, a minimum 3 of the 4 boundary lines, where it's your building and how far away it is from the sides as well as the back of the property. The other setback is from the road, like the road you use to access the property. So take, for example, well, the most common one everyone has is 75 feet from the road and 30 feet from the side. That's in the rural and the residential areas. So that means
And
if
how much from the back?
30 feet as well. I should have said that. I'm sorry. So let's take Friendship Road, for example. If you have a property that uses Friendship Road for access, as in Friendship Road and then your driveway, your home needs to be 75 feet from the edge of Friendship Road. It has to be 75 feet away from there. But
Excuse me, from the edge of the road or from the edge of the right of way?
from the edge of the road, from where the flat top is, 75 feet from there.
Okay, thanks.
So you're 75 feet from there, and then you would need to make sure you're 30 feet away from the property line for your neighbor on your right, the property line for your neighbor on your left, and the property line for your neighbor who's in your back. Even if your neighbor is a mile away, like most of the spaghetti lots that are in town, you still need to just say, yeah, it's going to be more than 30 feet away from them. So in this case, what happened was, before we even had a 2005 land use ordinance, the code enforcement officer at the time said that if you were on a private road, that was considered a private property line. That was, John Black did not consider that part of the road. He didn't consider that an actual road. Because it wasn't a public road. There wasn't a public right of way. He saw public roads and private roads as 2 different categories. Because that is what happens with some private roads. You own up to the middle of the line, unless it specifically says it in the agreements. So, and I think at the time, you had to be 50 feet away from the road, regardless of where you were. I think it was. I'd have to look at it again. So that's why he always did that. And I guess that's just been a precedent that his successor and that successor's successor kept doing, even to what our current code enforcement officer, Stan Waltz, does right now. There was a recent issue where the individual said, well, where does it say it? And when I tried to say, and I don't know where it is, so, and I asked, where does it say it in the ordinance? They said, well, this has just been the precedent. And I don't feel comfortable with that
Sure.
since it needs to be codified.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
think
why
it's,
this is why it was proposed.
Okay. Jim, you were going to say something?
sure, I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like codifying something that doesn't make sense. I don't think should have been done in the first place.
Well, and that was, I think, what I say in the last sentence for my note is, this was me just saying, this is what the precedent was for what was being done by the code enforcement officers or at least dating back to John Black. It can either be something we do still continue going forward, or if the planning board doesn't want it, then we don't have it. That's just it.
No, we can clarify it. We clarify it that a private road is treated just like a public road in terms of the road setback. It's
Right, and
not
that-
treated as a property line.
Right. And that's what I meant. Just the board can write down what they want to be interpreted moving forward. Because
Well,
interpretation, yeah. I'm sorry, Scott.
Well, I'm just thinking, I mean, I guess it goes back to the private agreement thing. Like we're saying that the town and therefore the planning board in this case, let's use the Sincarfa example. We are able, because Sincarfa is going to use controversial land for construction, we can impose some requirements on them to fix up the road, but we couldn't really impose on them requirements about the other roads because they're not going to be using them, but we could require them, as we have, to create a road association to get with other people. So, you know, one advantage of a private road and a private setup is the ability to get around is the wrong word, but you don't have the same requirements, and everybody going into that development, you know, you're signing a development thing, you know what the rules are going to be for that development. For example, in one of the places I used to live, there was a requirement on minimum lot size. And I moved into a housing group. There was a giant oval, a quarter-mile oval in the middle of grass and trees, and then an oval road, and then houses around the outside, and then more land around the outside of that. So no one could move in behind the houses. And we each had only an acre, which didn't meet the requirements, but the overall land of the 14 lots, you add all that land up, and we met the requirement for how much land was required for each house. And it was beautiful and it was nice, but it was only an acre and it didn't meet otherwise wouldn't have met the LUO. So one way to look at this road requirement is if it's a private road, it's not a town road, we're not maintaining it, it's a private agreement, why can't they agree to have a smaller setback? So that's another, so I'm not.
Follow that to its conclusion, they don't need to follow the 30 foot either.
That is correct. So.
Well, and again, that 75-30 that I mentioned, that's just for 2 districts in town. I'd have to look at the ordinance to see everything else, but
Yeah.
but I do understand the points that are being made.
Well, and I mean, I'm offering that as a devil's advocate, Jim, because I think I'm with you. I don't think we want to codify this thing.
I think we want to fix it.
You know, we could always, I mean, is there any state requirements on this, Max? Are we?
Setbacks are always I'm sorry, other than state and, well, yeah, state roads, we really have a lot of control over what's done really for
Okay.
setbacks.
So there's no minimum state setback from the road. Okay.
I don't think there should be any difference in how buildings are placed, be it on a private road or a public road.
Jeff, John, your thoughts?
I just say, are these standard like uniform? Say you're on a river or a lake, is it the same setback or is it different depending on what's around you?
Like 75 feet
Yeah.
from high water line.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Sometimes.
There is the shoreland ordinance for the lakes and rivers for those setbacks. For these items, for the road, well,
Here we're talking only about the road setback.
yeah,
That's-
for road and side rear setbacks, that always depends on the part of town you live in. It doesn't matter if it's near a lake or near the river. It depends on the district you're in. So, for example, the residential district is anything that is between 32 or 220 and the Madomic River, as well as 400 feet inland from those two roads. And then there's the historic village district, and then there's the downtown district, which is obviously all, and the village district, which is all in that Route 1 Main Street little pocket of town. And then there's the two sections of the Route 1 corridor, with Route 1B being anything between the Hill and Moody's, and then Route 1A being, the Hill to Nobleboro and Moody's to Warren. And then there's the rural district, which is pretty much all of northern Waldeboro. And then there's the industrial district, which is just two pockets really in town. Okay.
But the only setback we're talking about here is the road setback. And
Right, and
that varies in all of the 8 or 10 different districts that we have.
Correct.
And whether or not we're going to use the road setback from a public road and apply it to a private road, or
Right.
do we use the side and rear?
Correct.
And it's different.
It's
And I
very
think it should be different in all those different areas, but it shouldn't be different private road to public road.
Okay.
That's my view. Jeff?
So
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
go
guess
ahead.
to clarify, for instance, with Controversy Lane and those roads there, the property lines for each of those lots, do those run down the middle of the road or somewhere in the road?
that was actually a point of contention that a lot of people had.
Yeah, like
When-
where did, I guess that's my question. I have a piece of property on 32 and my property line, my understanding is it's not in the road. It's and that's a state road,
Right.
of course, and that's different, but my property line, my setbacks are based on the road, et cetera. There's no concern for me there because my line isn't in the road.
Right.
But in a case, for instance, in Sunset Road or that development, if as a private owner, you may, what you're proposing is that your limitations for your setback is less than 75 feet,
Mhm.
if you will, from the edge of the traveled way, because your property is actually in the road.
I wouldn't say that. I'd say it's still 75 feet from the edge of the traveled way, even if you own half the traveled way. It might be 90
Okay.
feet from your lot line.
So I didn't say it right, but in other words, you could potentially be 100 feet from your property line that you're obligated to build your house in that case.
So,
In that case, yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
On a private road.
well, to the point that you were probably getting at, or question you were asking, for Controversy Lane, for example, I don't know if their property line goes to the middle of the road. That's kind of a default thing.
It probably moves around.
It probably moves around.
Right.
I know that there's an easement deed when it was created that says, property owners have to give this amount so that people can pass through. I don't know if that means they own up to that own to the middle of the road, or if they own up to the easement.
Sure.
That's always the conflicting part.
Yeah.
So, but I think I understand what you're getting at of my property line could be in the middle of the road and I have to be 75 feet from the edge of the road, which is that plus, I don't know, 10 feet from that line.
Sure. And your line might be, the way they build the road probably doesn't follow precisely the property lines. I'm sure there's some contours that affect that. If the property line is here, the road might be here or here.
Mhm.
And so I guess whether you actually own to that point, whether there's an easement, whether it's owned, the road portion is actually owned by the association or a different owner. Yeah, I guess that's the part of this language is it sort of negates all that and says, doesn't matter if you own that entirety of that portion of that road, you don't get to build
Unless you're,
except for measuring from the edge of the road instead of your property line. Right. Okay.
Yeah. So, well, I think it's, I think it's fair. I think we need to codify this. I still don't know. I think it should say, instead of a comma between side and rear, it should say "and" on the standards of the side and rear setbacks.
how about a backslash?
Okay, that's fine. But I'm still, as living in a house that's 30 feet from the road, and a lot of the houses on my street are close to the road, and it isn't necessarily a detriment. I'm still wrestling with that. If someone who wants to be part of a private road and a private road association, that where I'm still wrestling with requiring them to have the same 75-foot road setbacks in a private development as opposed to, because a private development, and another example from one of the places where I used to live, that's, in fact, my development is similar. It was very rural, beautiful farm country and apple orchards. And in fact, the town and the area wanted developments of home, as opposed to having those beautiful scenic main roads tied up with having houses lined up and down them instead of beautiful scenery and vistas and woods. They chose to have these developments off on side roads where all the houses were and keep the main roads more original. And I just think that often those private developments can be an opportunity that if you put those same restrictions, I'm wrestling with it. So
Well,
I
Scott, I see.
you bring it to
that
the town. Go ahead, Jim.
No, I think that a lot of the places that we see that are close to the road, as yours is, predate the zoning ordinances that push things back. I mean,
No,
it was, and then we all created rules because we wanted to have some structure to what happened.
Yes.
Now I think we just have to consistently apply those rules to the future building in the town.
If I may make a
Yes.
suggestion, maybe since it's 20 to 8, maybe this is an item that we can just table for now, and I'll ask Stan Waltz, the code enforcement officer, to just give a little more insight next time, and maybe that might help with some thoughts going on in the group here. And if anyone has any questions, I can ask that to Stan as well.
Okay, well, I think that's a good approach. I agree with that. I will say that regardless of my opinion, I'm comfortable with putting this. I just think if we're going to put this on the ballot and we're going to have this as something that might be a change, that this needs to be made really clear what this means and the numbers involved, so that when people vote on it, or if there's a public meeting, that they comment on it, we get an understanding of what the rest of the town wants to do. I think it's important enough to be, you know, you know, we can offer, you know, making this, you know, setting this into the LUO one way or the other. But I think it's just going to need to be clear to people what they're voting on.
Is the land use ordinance committee still in existence?
No, they were, because the land use ordinance passed last November, their cause was settled, so it dissolved at that point.
Okay.
I mean, I just be interested in some of their opinions. I think,
Yeah.
Scott, you have it exactly right. What's the town want? We need more input. We've got a couple of ideas. We just need more input on what makes sense for the town.
Yeah.
Barbara,
Well, I
and-
can, go ahead.
no, I was going to quickly say Barbara and Sarah were members of the planning board who were on that, so I can ask Sarah and Barbara can come to a meeting.
Yeah, and
Scott,
all
were you-
of us, I think you should ask the people we know in town and just try to get a feel for it. Not that we should vote based on a inaccurate polling, but at least try to get some ideas and
Some
make
feedback.
sure people know about it. Okay.
And just a quick thing,
Yeah.
if you want to see what these road setbacks and side rear setbacks are for the different parts of town, they are found under section 6.8, the schedule of dimensional requirements in the land use
Okay.
ordinance.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Okay, I would like to try to fit per our normal, if we can finish by 8, it would be great. Is everybody in favor of stopping wherever we are at 8, or do people too tired now to?
I'm
Kitchen.
starving. 8 o'clock is a stretch.
Okay.
That's fine. That's actually understandable.
Okay, okay, so I have some other things on the others of these that we can deal with next time. But I would like to ask one more question of Max before we go. Can you hold out 2 more minutes, Jim?
And then Scott, I'll do a few more of these items. I'm just not going past 8, that's all.
Oh, okay, great, okay. So, okay, let's do a few more then. The middle of page 2, the one that refers to page 7-12. I'm not sure what that means. All applicants will speak with the Waldeboro Fire Chief for the following items. It should be
Yeah, that's
Oh.
supposed to be the paragraph with section 7.12 emergency services. And then
Yeah.
it'll list 7.12.1, 7.12.2, which is the access and the sufficient water during an emergency.
But
yeah.
the Waldeboro Fire Chief will make recommendations for each item under this section at their discretion. Oh, I see, which the municipal authority has the decision to accept. Okay,
So
I'll read the full section and maybe then it will. So you're saying if we read the whole thing, that sentence would make sense?
right, because it
Okay.
reads that and then it lists that the applicant will prove that it has sufficient water during emergency, and then the following one is the fire chief may recommend or require that they have a lockbox or some way of accessing the property in the event of an emergency.
Okay. Okay, then I'm fine.
Because just the quick thing on that one is when we first had the applicants come in, Chief Smeltzer wondered to what extent he was requiring, because we have some people, well, take the Midcoast Gymnasium, for example, the owner currently lives on the property. So to have a lockbox, which is maybe hundreds of dollars, for an addition to a property that's always been there, for a property owner who lives on the site, he didn't know if he's comfortable really recommending it, because he just needs to know that someone's on the property when there's an emergency. And if you live there, it's pretty easy. Whereas he has no problem recommending it to someone who has like a storage warehouse in the middle of town, and yet the
Mhm.
person lives in another state.
Got it.
So he didn't know to what point he can say, this is what I want, this is what's needed. And I've always said, you're making a recommendation, you use the logic you want, and then it's really up to the planning board or the code enforcement officer to say whether or not the recommendations should be followed through.
Okay, so then instead of, in that sentence, in the very end of it, instead of decision to accept, I would put authority to accept, right?
He's really making the final decision someone else's. He's pushing the decision. He's not questioning the authority.
It gets to make. the
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay, so it's okay. Okay,
So
You can
you-
reword, you can reword that which initial authority
and accept,
will accept or
Responsibility?
decline. Yeah.
yeah.
Will accept or decline. Is that your suggestion, Jim?
That's, yeah, and it's also that, has a decision to accept is also acceptable, but it's.
How about which the municipal authority may choose to accept / deny?
Perfect.
May choose.
It's the right intent. Now it's wordsmithing, so.
Okay,
May choose to accept / deny is what is being suggested. Is that correct?
I would say or deny instead of slash. May choose to accept or deny.
Or.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna come up with another one, Susan, just to drive you nuts. No, I'm not.
I'm available. What are you going to? What's your version, Jim?
No, I'm just teasing. I'm only
Okay.
teasing.
Um,
Next one, 9-8.
the next, I'm fine. I don't have anything on that one.
Yeah,
And I
makes
wanted
sense. It makes
I wanted
sense.
to get to the next two. So the top of page 3, shipping containers. We all remember going through this, so I think this is a good one, Max, and I like this wording. I would propose a change to the very end of that.
Yes.
Shipping containers that are significantly repurposed to change the primary function from storage to a commercial or residential use shall be exempt from the restrictions of this section. This exemption is revoked if the shipping container is used primarily for storage. In other
So-
words, somebody can modify it and they can get an exemption, but if it turns out they're using it for storage or they change their use to storage, it comes back under. So, but rather than altered, it doesn't even have to be re-altered. The coffee can could have gone in with a very altered building, and it looks like a coffee shop and it acts like a coffee shop, and they close the coffee shop and they start storing stuff in there. Then it's storage and it's not allowed. Is that fair?
You got what I was aiming for, and I'm
Right.
fine making those changes. So
Because I'm saying the thing doesn't have to be actually altered. It's just if it goes back to the purpose of being used primarily for storage, it's not exempt anymore.
Are you
So-
deleting the word outdoor?
I'm deleting the words altered to and outdoor.
Used primarily for
Says if the
storage.
shipping container is used primarily for storage.
Okay, I've got it.
That's a proposal.
I'm okay with that part of it. I don't like the word revoke, though. Does not apply. This exemption does not apply if the shipping container is used primarily for storage.
I like that.
I just think it's cleaner, it's just clearer.
Mhm.
You guys okay with that in town?
sounds good.
Okay, okay. Good, thank you. So the next one Tiny homes, I think that has to be added, like you said. When I first read it, I looked at it and it was reducing living space from 750 to 600 square feet.
So
And a 600 square feet is like 24 by 24, which is, that's a big
Just-
tiny house.
well, actually, just a quick clarification. So
Yep.
section 10.24 is actually single wide manufactured homes. I'm including tiny homes on the end of that section.
Okay.
So that 600 square foot living space is actually for a manufactured home, not for a tiny house.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so the reason for that reduction was what's come up recently, and a point made that Ralph's Homes does sell some homes that are under 750 square feet. So it's odd that you could buy a place from Ralph's that wouldn't comply with the ordinance. So I just threw out 600 because that was a number I had, but if it can be reduced even lower, if people would like. I think the reason why that number was put in there was that the people who were making the ordinance at the time wanted the more, I'll say, nicer manufactured homes, the newer ones that were over 750 square feet. But times have clearly changed, and you can actually get a pretty nice manufactured home for under 750 square feet. So
Okay.
I threw out 600 just to have something by this meeting, but it can go lower if we wanted to.
Well, as long as it covers what's available and people can buy, and tiny homes is in a separate section, then that's fine. I think, well, let's ask this, the tiny, so what is the proposed number for tiny homes?
The state defines tiny homes as things that are up to 400 square feet. So between 400 square feet and 600 feet, there's kind of a gap of not allowed use.
So that doesn't,
Unless it's a stick-built home, I should say.
does that make any sense to have a gap?
And just a quick clarification, section 10.24.4.3.2, that's to have it synced up with mobile home parks. But yeah, to your question, Scott, of having that gap between 400 and 600 square feet, that's the question that I leave up to the planning board. If you want to have that 600, or if you want to have that reduced even further.
600 is 14 by 45. It's not really a tiny, what you see on the HGTV for a tiny home. But I want to go back to the single wide manufactured homes first.
Wow. Go ahead.
What you originally said, Max, intrigues me, that the reason it was put at 750 is to maintain the quality and provide a decent living space, right? Why is that
Right.
changed?
I'm sorry?
Why is that changed? Why do we want to change it?
Well, publicly, I think that's what people were saying. I think it was more to prevent the older mobile homes that weren't really that well built and just happened to be under 750 square feet.
Yeah.
The reason why some people would at least like this to be changed is because, at least over at Ralph's, there are some very nice mobile homes that are being sold that are under 750 square feet. And at least in the ordinance, you do have to have 14 feet of horizontal width. So as long as we're still having that, it's still a pretty nice sized living space you're getting there.
So the folks that built the low quality homes people were concerned about before still out there selling homes?
I can't really speak for who sells what, unless they come to the planning board. But I think what I'll have to do is talk with Ralph's Homes at the top of the hill, because it was more of a sort of irony thing, I think, when there was the case with Viola Stone, where people said, well, why is the town not allowing homes that could be sold at Ralph's, which is based in Waldoboro? Why are we not allowing those homes to be here? And I think that is a fair point. You know, if it's sold in town, you should be allowed to use what's in town.
Well, no, I
But that
think-
could also be looked at as the tail wagging the dog as well.
Right.
You know, they could decide, oh, well, now that they've dropped the number, and once again, just being the devil's advocate, but maybe now they start selling something that's, 10 by 30. And do we conform to that because now they're selling that? Just as a side point.
Well, and I don't know if I made this a note in my, maybe I didn't, but the other point, the other standard in here that I think kind of saves the whole thing is the 14-foot horizontal distance, horizontal width. I think that's what helps still make sure that they are still good condition homes that aren't too small to avoid what you're talking about.
Well, but I'm
That is my
concerned that we're trying to be the arbiter of quality here. I mean, I think there's been so many advances in, and people's tastes have changed, and the equipment that's available and the small scale stuff and the design that's done that enable a lot of these, I've seen a tiny house that fits on the back of a pickup truck. And it's a lifestyle issue. And I guess I'm struggling with, the whole idea of this is we want things to be nice, but just this arbitrary choice of size is not an arbiter of the quality of the living space and conditions.
Again,
Really.
I think just looking at the time, maybe a suggestion I'll make is I'll talk with Ralph's Homes and see what the smallest home they sell is and see if I can take a look at it. Because maybe the smallest home they sell is 650 square feet, let's say. We can still stay with 600. Maybe we can boost it up to 650. Or maybe you'll look at it and say, let's keep it at 750. And so,
Well, but Max, I think you should go ahead and do that. And I think I agree to postpone this since it's 5 of 8 and we should all think about it. But to Jeff's point, what Ralph's Homes is selling or not, I agree with people who are saying, well, if I can buy it at Ralph's, why can't I use it in town? But Jeff's point is correct. We don't want the tail wagging the dog.
Right.
On the other hand, there's a lot of really great tiny spaces. And again, it's, I don't know that I want to obviate that. And I also don't know that we want to have a gap. What is the difference between, a Ralph's motor home and at 600 square feet and a tiny home at 400, that there's a gap? You could have a tiny house at 500, I'm not sure what to do here. So I need to think about it, but.
yeah, the tiny home would have to have a definition included, which I think,
I think the state's taking care of that for us, haven't they?
yeah, states define, and that's actually, should we just transition to tiny homes right now then?
Nope. We're gonna give you more homework on the
Right.
single wide. What do our neighbors require?
I'm sorry?
The neighboring towns. What are their minimum standards for single
From what I've
wides?
been told by Stan Waltz, who does work for 3 other towns, he said that there is no living space requirement for manufactured homes. He says that those towns don't even have that language in there. There's the 14-foot width item, but there's nothing saying a living space has to be so many square feet
Or manufactured specifically.
for manufactured homes specifically. Thank you for that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's because manufactured housing nationally or statewide at least has certain standards for certain living standards that it needs to accomplish.
Mhm.
And so that they've fought through those on their own.
Right.
With
And
the
it was,
government on
Right, yeah.
size wise for that.
Well,
And
size and kitchen, septic, whatever. I mean, all those electrical, there's all those requirements that are going to be imposed on them, right?
So but I will check that as well to Jim's request, other towns' language
Okay.
on living space.
Yeah, good. This,
Thank you,
this
Max.
is very, I think this is important, because I think this is an important thing to add. So both the mobile homes and the tiny houses are important to add. So it's worth taking the time to think it out and get it right. So I appreciate everybody's input on this.
And just very quickly, because I see a minute left, tiny homes, that is state language. I'm not really messing around with that. That's just in case the language changes, we have it codified in our ordinance. I will include the definition to what Jim's point was, that the state's already defined a tiny home for us. So we don't really have to.
And they included 400 square feet in their definition?
Yes.
Okay.
I
I love this though, multiple tiny homes, as long as the sum of the multiple tiny homes doesn't
That-
exceed 400 square
I was
feet.
surprised. That was the state language. I swear. I was-
Hobbit Village.
Well, I'm building an 8x20 off-grid cabin, so
Power to you.
There you
More
go.
power to you. And then the last one was just the renewable energy structures for commercial use. So this isn't necessarily someone who wants to mount a solar panel on the roof or something to power their home. This is what Sincarfa is doing, Sunray Solar. These are community solar farms. This is just when someone comes to us, or even beyond solar farms, this could be wind turbines or whatnot. This is someone putting a decommissioning plan and them understanding that if they do not follow through with their plan, then the town would automatically get those funds to then address the removal of the structures, as well as rehabilitating the property. So like revegetation. And it's also just including that when construction is being done, as well as the removal of these structures are being done, that proper notices are given to the residents in that area, at least 14 days. The town is one of those parties, just because with Sunrays, that was an issue that I was receiving a few calls about, where there was a neighbor who just wasn't happy that certain vehicles were happening at certain times of day. And so even on my off days, I had to call Sunrays to say, hey, can I get the project manager? And then I finally got the project manager. And this, I think, will at least help alleviate some things in the future.
Okay.
And just because it's late, we can table it for next time.
Okay, let's do that. Max, let me ask you one more action item for you, is if you can go through, Susan had a lot of editorial things as well, that if you can make a new version of this for next time, then that we can read ahead of time, that some of these maybe, we're all set with and already addressed. So, so that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay.
And I assume we will not have it next August, because that's going to be the solar farm, but I'll have it ready just in case.
Yeah. It'll go swimmingly fast.
I hope so.
I'm not a betting man, so, okay. So thank you, everybody. Could I have, unless there's any is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded that we adjourn. There being no debate on a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Oh, I'm
We
sorry.
have to roll call.
Jim, are you-
ignore it.
What's that?
Ignore the roll call for an adjournment. Just
Woohoo! Okay, all in favor of adjournment, signify aye.
Yeah, let's do it.